All right, everyone, welcome to Outside Our Walls today. Thanks for joining us. This podcast exists because we want to make sure that we as Anchor Church are listening to outside voices. We don't want to become a church that thinks we are the wisest, smartest, greatest, have all the wisdom, because quite frankly, we don't. I'm a pastor, but I am a sheep first that has lots to learn and lots to grow in. And so we want to benefit from other people, other wisdom. Today, I have with me a friend of mine, Steve Ross. He is a pastor. He is a pastor in California. I'm going to have him tell you about his church here in a second. He also currently is the director of diversity in A29 West, and that could be changed a little bit, but he's been doing that for a while. Written some good articles just about helping us think through that as well. I was reading one or two yesterday from 2018. I think he wrote something which was helpful. And he has also got 8 kids, and so I think he can help us think through parenting. he'd probably say parenting. Every good parent says I can help you with mistakes, but I know that I would say the same thing, man.
Feeling that these days, brother.
So man, thanks for jumping in with us, man.
No doubt. Thanks for having me.
To get to know you. Yeah. Tell us. So you're at Arise Ventura. Give me an update. You've been there for a couple years now, or no? You've been there longer than that, but you've been lead pastor. Give me some.
You know what? It's best for people to understand the story that just from the history. So we've been here 3 years, and for the first 2 years, we were with the church that had been established 5 years prior. So the work as a whole, I guess at this point, would be headed toward an 8-year mark, if you would. Coming up, it would have been at the beginning of 2021. And that church was Seed. Sean Garman planted that church. And he called me up 3 years ago to help him establish some discipleship rhythm and like bring about some structure, raise up some leaders, do some leadership development. And around that time, Sean started increasing his responsibilities with Acts 29. He's now the regional executive director, which would have been the network director for Acts 29 US West. Yeah. And at the time, he was like an assessment coordinator for 15 to 20 hours a week. Then it went to half-time. Then it went to full-time as an associate network director. And the whole time, I'm working bivocationally, and I start preaching not just once a quarter, I'm preaching like once a month, then I'm preaching every other week. And then so it kind of went like that, but we also saw some attrition in our church that was like a shift. As I started bringing discipleship culture, I'm more formal than Sean is, and sometimes can be experienced more rigid. A lot of people were like, hey, I didn't sign up for that. We start talking about membership. They're like, man, this ain't they said what do they call it? I'll remember it, but they basically said we didn't sign up for that.
A social club or like a...
No, the opposite. It's so funny. I'll think of it, man. Okay. And it's like it's just left, like we're not doing that. So it's like, all right, we get it. So anyway, bottom line is toward the end of last spring, we came to a spot where we say, we have a good core group of people who are following my leadership. And Sean and I have been talking about me taking over as lead pastor. So I replanted the church, kind of shut down for the summer. And, June, got back together in August and worked a little bit toward like gathering who's going to be with us and what's that going to look like, what's going to be a new development of the church. And so we relaunched on September 29th of 2019. So yeah, coming up on a year with Arise, where we call ourselves a radically diverse group of world changers, right? And we got our our up, in, and out. So we exalt Christ, we embrace community, and we engage culture together. And so it's a wonderful mix. Ventura is a great place, paradise-like, but it's also a very divided community. So our church is pretty prophetic in that regard because people across every socioeconomic status, ethnically and culturally diverse, are together on mission, walking, working, and worshiping together. And it's like, yeah, that's not the norm in our town, No.
So you guys have when you say it's divided, I think I remember watching your video. You have a video. If you want to check it out, there's a Steve, his church Arise Ventura has got it on X29's. I think it's on their website. It's got a little blurb on the church. Which, by the way, we were supposed to have that the week they were going to come film um, was the week everything shut down in the country.
Crazy.
So we're like, well, that's just, it is what it is, man.
Wow.
But go take a look at it. I think you were saying that there's like a dividing line, right? Like it's
Sure.
like on
Yeah.
one side it's one
Yeah,
way.
most people won't admit it, but it is so true. There's the way the city is built, kind of come out of this downtown strip and around, and it's like a vast spread from downtown to midtown over into the east end and even out toward Oxnard, Camarillo. I mean, it just keeps going. But right at that hill to where the city and things start, where really historically things began, it's called the West Side. And when I first moved here, people told me things like, "Hey, don't go to the West Side.
Hmm.
Hey, you don't want to be over there on the avenue. It's Ventura Avenue."
Okay.
I'm like, why not? You go over there and it's like a crazy, like the socioeconomic divide is clear. Our town is maybe 30% Hispanic, but the community there is 95% Hispanic in terms of who lives over there, right?
Yep.
The community is 1.8% African American. Large number of those individuals would live down toward the west side. And so what it was is like you see this, it's behind the hill. It's not part of the surf culture. It's not part of the beach and the paradise in the downtown. And it's like largely been rejected. And we just see like the gospel reconciles all that, reconciles every single one of those people to God through Jesus, right, by faith. And so then is also able to reconcile all those people together. And so basically, we just are intentionally a church in Ventura for the Avenue, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how in the video you can maybe hear a little bit more, and you can even see some of the shots, right? You see like certain parts of Ventura that's like, oh wow, that's a nice pier, and then other places where it's like, oh okay, I can tell that's a more rundown neighborhood, and we just see like the integration of that is the mission that God's called us to.
Yeah, that's good. I think we've talked about this and we're gonna try and do a series on this, I think, in the spring. But the theology doctrine of the Imago Dei helps to really grasp what you just said about every single person in the city. It doesn't matter of their ethnic background, their cultural heritage, their socioeconomic, where they are socioeconomically. If we understand everybody to be made in the image of God, needs to be reconciled to their Creator, I think it actually helps mission. It helps us to think through mission less on the don't go to there, but more how can we go to there, or how can we go on that side? Do you agree with that? Any wisdom on that? Any thoughts?
No, I mean that is central to the gospel's call for the Christian, right? The kingdom is in the margins, and it's not to the negation of whatever would be more centrally focused in society, whether that be based on money or culture, ethnicity, as we consider even racial issues. The truth is that God was very kind to us to send us in Christ the example for how he's always been about going to the least. He's always been about going and bringing the sojourner in. He's always been about integrating, and not even from a like, you must assimilate to the dominant culture, more so you're also a part of the family.
Yeah.
And so, starting with the Imago Dei, when people see others as projects and they don't see them as individuals, I tell my kids all the time, that's not a bum because they see someone and say that, right? They don't care if he sleeps under a bridge. He's a man who's created in the image of God. And image bearers have inherent dignity, they have value, they have worth, and Christ has come to redeem that in all of us, right? The redemption that we have is a restoration of the image that has been marred by sin. So just because I don't look all jacked up, right? Or just because I, have some kind of vast diversity from the people who might be around me, doesn't diminish my dignity. And Christ is saying like, hey, all of that is meant for oneness. And even in the church, as we live in light of that, and we work really intentionally about it. You know, John 17 and praying, he's praying for our oneness, praying for our unity. What we see is that gives an evangelistic appeal to the world, because he says, if they're one like you and I have been one, Father, then the world will know that you love them and that you sent me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And
Right.
so for us, it's like life and lips. It's an opportunity for us to like preach the gospel and also live out of that provocative witness.
Yeah, that's good. It's so hard, I think, to not tribalize ourselves. And I don't, I mean, I know why that is, because it's sin in us, and where we run towards familiarity, things like that. Um, but that's not who Jesus is. Like, it's not who Jesus calls us to be. So when we think about it, even from the standpoint of, one of the things I think Jesus hated about hated in the godly sense, not hated in the human sense, hated in the godly sense,
Yeah.
about the Pharisees, was their exclusivity, because they felt like they were the ones that had it all together, and yet their life didn't match their doctrine. And when he's trying to call them out on things, he's calling them out mainly on their hyper superiority, or something like that just gave them some sort of leg up on everybody else.
Yeah.
And I think we don't I think we do deal with that. I think we're more Pharisees than we know. I think we need to be careful. I think American evangelicalism has just especially Reformed American evangelicalism, has a bent towards Phariseeism and fundamentalism that is dangerous for the church. And I think thinking about diversity, actually thinking about it in context of the Imago Dei, it can bust us out of that pretty quickly if we actually spend the time.
Yeah. And just to piggyback on the part you're just talking about, right? We think about our theological persuasions that have like kind of gotten us into a tribe or a camp. And you think about, Reformed theology and whatnot, and even fundamentalism and how it has influenced those things. And even we probably want to shake a lot of that off. And so we work really hard not to do that. But just the way in which we even go about it is all in that mindset of thinking. It's all up here. It's orthodox, has to be didactic, and it has to be doctrinal, right? And we miss the orthopraxy. And so if we are thinking about it right, then what does it do? It leads us to practicing something. And that's why, we try to do a really good job of saying, hey, we're going to hold these things in tandem, because it's both and not the either or. And you got to think deeply about some things so that you can feel deeply about some things. Compassion, right, is going to come about because you can understand and whatever. But then those things are really going to happen in the context of relationships. And so when you move close to people, when you serve people, that's where you see the fruit. So that's my hope and my prayer, and not only for, our church, but also other local churches and our network, even as we talk about how to do some of that together with the other churches, and
yeah, man. And that's why I think it's good. It's good that you are have at least for a season kind of overseen the diversity, just helping us process and think through diversity in Acts 29. Tell me a little bit about what that means. Like, what does that mean for you? How are you thinking about that role?
Yeah. So, it just a few years ago came to the spot where before I even had really entered the network, but was in transition coming up to help Sean. He was telling me about the things that were happening in the network, some of the focus groups that had come about, some of the, guys being at the conference in Reno, and just really assessing where things were and where you want to go. And the network leadership team had determined that they wanted to have someone that would kind of help to shape things toward being a more realistic and true representation of the global church. We are a diverse global family, right? In Acts 29. And the hope and the goal was to be able to have that to be something that is, you can see it and experience it, right? It's not just like we're talking about it because we got churches that are in Lebanon. We're so grateful for Pastor Marwan and the City Bible Church and the fact that we can help them, over in Beirut and whatnot. But at the same time, the U.S. West is comprised of every tribe, tongue, and nation lives here.
Yeah.
And we have a great opportunity to be intentionally reaching the nations. And so we just wanted to like do things on purpose. And so it got down to how do we focus on retention. So we have some churches that have come in, Hispanic churches, African American churches, and they felt not welcome.
Yeah.
Korean pastor said, "Man, all the guys who are in my circle always say, 'Why are you over there in that white network?'" Right? And so he's like, "They want me to leave, and I want them to come in." Well, he's got 200 other reformed, gospel-centered, missional churches that don't see Acts 29 as a place for them. We
Yeah.
saw that as something that needed some attention for change. So what are the things that need to transition to change? So it's like meetings, talking, focusing in on things, having conversations, getting some, like letting people be honest about their experience and bringing that to the network leadership team so that they can hear and know things that maybe it's like, whoa, I would have never even known that. Um, and then so that on the retention side, it's like, how do we better keep people here? But then at the same time, like I just said with the pastor who shares about his network, the recruiting side of it is how do we help people from every tribe, tongue, and nation see Acts 29 US West as an accessible network so that they can come and see like, yeah, I want assessment, I want coaching, I want training, I want support. I am gospel centered, I am missional. I'm driven by these same things, and then therefore like that's a place for us. And so working through that, you just realize that you got to be intentional with this. So we taught some workshops, been able to get around and do some teaching at local churches, right? I always tell people same thing I said a minute ago. It's going to happen in the context of relationships. It's not about like going and doing the big, oh, let's just recruit all these Black people to come, or whatever. Let's get all the yeah, let's get all the Asian guys and we just bring them in. It's not like that. It's relational, right? It's going to happen with the consistency and slow rotation. So even in something like what we're doing now is just one of the opportunities that it has afforded me to help our churches and our family to think through these things so that they can empower and equip the people in their churches to even be more biblically astute when it comes to issues of the Imago Dei and diversity. And then also to be able to help folks when they say like, yeah, we want to plant over in this community, or we want our church to look more like our community. How do we do that?
Yeah. Yeah. That's good, man. I think first of all, I love that we're intentionally thinking through how not to just bring people in. I guess that's a goal in and of itself, but how to make them feel a part. Like I think those are different things. Like you come in and you feel like, oh yeah, I'm here, but but then to feel a part. This isn't just a bunch of white guys, going, oh, this is, we're a bunch of white dudes, and this is cool. Like, I, I mean, fine, but that's not the kingdom. I mean,
Yeah.
the kingdom is a lot more rich than that, a lot more beautiful than that, and to break it down to, we can talk divides over skin color, but if you do just break it, this is why I think the Imago Dei is so important, because if you break it down to the Imago Dei, then it's like, well, we're all the same. I mean, from the standpoint of all made in God's image, beautifully diverse, culturally diverse, and God did that on purpose to show His beauty, and how He's, how we all are different. Our differences show God's glory, and I think that's great. But then being able to come together, united under Jesus, where people feel welcomed and their voices are heard and their skin colors are prized and all of those things. I just love that we're thinking through that, because I think that is it's such a needed thing. I mean, look, let's just be honest. This season of life this year has been tough.
Oh man, come on,
bro. Like, it's tough. I mean, your job is hard. This year hasn't made it any easier, or maybe in some ways it has made it easier, because at least it's not a conversation piece. like at least we can talk about it. I
You know
feel like
what? I never even thought about that. But you're so right. I like it has made it easier. I'll say this on record. There was
yeah,
2 years ago we were in Reno, and I got a bunch of pastors coming up to me like, "Why do we even need to talk about this?" And then some of those same pastors call my phone, "Hey, can you talk to not just me, but my whole elder team?"
yeah, yep,
And it's like,
yep,
"Oh, okay. Oh, it has made it easier because it was always an issue." And what's happening is 2020, there's been a little bit of a reckoning. You know what I mean? And so
yeah.
now it's like it's on everybody's plates, and we can't ignore it.
Yeah.
Um, but I
It's
don't mean
easy
to
to
cut you
ignore
off.
when there's no problems.
Yeah, man.
But all of a sudden you got problems and we got to say, well, how do we think through this? I think one of the things for the church, and I love, again, I love that it's a gift. Actually, I think this is a gift for Acts 29 that this was recognized before 2000, before 2020.
That's true.
Because if it was proactively considered as
Now we're
opposed to
talking.
reactionary, right? So like to react to something is fine, but it just seems token. Like it seems like, oh, fine,
That's
we got to
good.
deal with this, as opposed to
Jay,
prior to it. Man,
yes,
that is a
everything
gift.
you're saying. Yes, Jay, you're saying it. You're saying it. I was on a call recently with our team that's national, and they were talking about, hey, how do we respond? How do we respond? And it actually came up in that conversation where we're saying, hey, the first thing we need to remember is that we do respond. We
Yeah,
don't react.
yeah, right,
So
right.
everybody who wants to react really quickly is trying to excuse responsibility, trying to maybe win friends and influence people, seem as though they're in the know, and make sure that nobody loops them into whatever camp they don't want to be associated with and whatnot. They're motivated by things that can oftentimes be disingenuous.
Right.
Responses, sometimes Jesus responds days later, and everybody's trying to figure out why you didn't come. He wouldn't have died. Did he not say that? Did they
Yeah,
not say that?
yeah,
Lazarus would not have passed away if you would have come. He said that's actually not true,
yeah,
right?
right.
He waited intentionally so that the works of God could be seen. And so the thing is that it's been a beautiful thing. If you've looked at, like, people are always like, well, where do I start? Man, we put together a catalog of resources. You go
Yeah,
into that, we're like, hey, go start here. You want to know about ethnic diversity? You want to know about cultural diversity? You want to know about how to do multi-ethnic ministry? Whatever. We put a whole list together. Read this, read that, blogs, books, articles, the whole nine. We wrote our own position paper, things like that. But it takes time because we're thinking through it, like saying, we've been proactive about this work, and we're looking forward to the time when that's an expression that's clear in the U.S. West. It's already clear when you go to global gathering. You
yeah, right.
cannot deny the fact that Acts 29 is a diverse global family. We just
Yeah,
wanted to be able to do better with that in the West. And so anyway, at the national level, we just had this conversation. I bring it up just to say the difference between reacting and responding is, one is in the moment, oftentimes not thought through, and it can be, like I said, it's not genuine. And the response is like, what is the right thing to do? Which is really what you talk about when you ask about justice and mercy,
yeah,
right?
right,
It's like,
right.
what is the right thing to do? Okay, let's do that. And
Yeah,
it's not always like I just got something to say every time something comes across my timeline. I'm sharing everything. I'm responding to everybody really quickly on my timeline, and I'm saying this, that, and there are a whole bunch of pithy statements. Like, we're working for unity in diversity. We're
yeah.
working for integration and oneness. And man, you can't do that by always boxing and defending.
No, no, you can't. Sometimes you gotta throw the uppercut.
Yeah, so true. But yeah, this 2020 has been a crazy year. So it's made it easier because I've gotten to be able to have the conversation with people who otherwise it wasn't really on their radar, and they've seen the need for it because it didn't just happen in society, but it also then incited things in their church where they saw that people were pretty diametrically opposed to each other on things that the gospel has a central um, where they're supposed to meet in the middle. They're like,
Yeah,
oh, there's polarizing perspectives, and so
mhm,
it's been good to try to help through,
yeah, yep,
churches with some of that. But it's also just been tough, man. I've been fighting like despair, like sometimes it's just like I can't believe it. We're walking through this book with a few people in our church, and they asked, the book in the study guide just says, hey, what would be your big dream prayer that you would ask God for in this day based on what you're seeing? And I said, my big dream is that we'd stop seeing the public killings of African Americans by law enforcement, because no matter if it was a right or a wrong, right? No matter if it was justified or unjustified, it's desensitizing us and it
Yeah.
is dehumanizing us.
Right.
It's
Right.
desensitizing the society,
Society.
dehumanizing Black people,
Yeah.
right? Because the first thing you think of is like, well, some must have deserved it or whatever. Or it's just like, man, I don't know if we're supposed to just watch people get killed like that.
Yeah. No.
You understand? I know we're not. So it's just one of those moments where I'm like, hey, you know what? My big prayer is like, Lord, can you make it stop? Because I see that Satan is using it to further divide people. He hates the Imago Dei.
He does. Yeah.
He hates the human race that is one blood. He does not like us. And so he's dividing it, or he's causing division. He's using this to bring about division. And I think that the church in this day, in America, is really having to like do business with the fact that we've been okay with some of that.
Yeah.
As long as things have been peacetime, but now it's wartime.
And now it seems like it. I mean, it's where it feels like it. And it's not like the country hasn't been in worse spots. I mean, we're not quite at war yet. We had a civil war.
Yeah.
So we've been divided in a lot
Yeah.
of ways over this issue for a really long time. It just comes to a head now, this is where I think the church has an opportunity to step up and show the beauty of Christ. We've talked about one of our values. You gave some of your values earlier, I think, as Rise Ventura. One of our values is passionately one.
Okay.
And I said something to everybody not so long ago. The passionately one's easy to say. It's really hard to practice in seasons like this.
Man.
Because everybody's got theirs. I mean, even let's just even go not even race. Let's just go wearing masks. Like, man, like you can find some division. Like, that's going to be divisive, and people don't know. And so, but if we believe the Bible, there is one body, one Spirit, just as you're called to the one hope that you're called to, you're called one Lord, one faith, one baptism. Like these things, and so we just need to prize that and see it. And I had mentioned earlier to you, I was talking to Tyler St. Clair on one of these podcasts earlier. So I was the first one I did right after Ahmaud Arbery. It was before George Floyd.
Got it.
And I just was asking them, like, what can we do as I'm a white pastor, I'm a white male. So like from the standpoint of hierarchy and culture, in our culture anyway, a white male middle class pastor, like I could, so like you kind of go, well, in something like the top of the pecking order in some ways, how can I benefit? Like, how can I learn? And his thought, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, but he said, in terms of diversity, how can we just learn? He said, listen, I don't need it. We don't need statistics. You don't need to help. You don't need to give me some statistics. But listen to my experience. And I just think that there's something about coming alongside another human being and listening and benefiting and trying to understand, and ask questions. Any other thoughts for us on that?
Yeah.
Like,
I would totally affirm what Tyler said. I would say that is just especially the starting point. It's like you got to listen, which is how you're going to learn. And behind that, I think that the steps that are taken in listening and learning lead us to lament. I used to be a Baptist preacher. All right.
Hey man, go for it. Give me lament, man. Give it to us.
In Acts 29, man, I can give you the points here. I can't give you all the passion all the time. I don't want to get people like trying to figure out like what's happening. Cue the organ, I'm just playing.
Hey, so we could use a little organ, bro. We can benefit from that.
Amen. Hey, look. You're so funny. So I was just gonna say, like, honestly, lament happens and almost like what I was talking about with compassion, because proximity, right, increases our ability to feel. It's like, okay, I've actually heard this out. I've listened to the experience of my brother who doesn't see things like me, or I've heard the experience of my sister who has not you know, whose life doesn't look like mine, and I've learned that that actually hurts them, and as a body, that means that it hurts me too, and so
Yeah.
it can lead me to weeping with those who weep. And I think that's what I'm leading my church through that book. You know, is just is really about like how do we lament together, which is we don't complain about God, but we complain to Him, and it postures our hearts for worship. It reminds us that it's like, hey, this is actually the most Christian thing I can do, is I
Yeah.
can take my burdens to Him. And I think that white, evangelical, Christian, gospel-centered, whatever you want to call, you know, yourself, individuals right now have such a unique and a wonderful opportunity to
Yeah.
come alongside their brothers and sisters of color, to help us not be like a voice crying in the wilderness. You know, even, you know, it's like, be a voice for the voiceless, to say like, hey, our brothers and sisters are hurting, our body parts are hurting, and so are we hurt too.
Yeah.
And when there's that healthy integration, even if it's not in your congregation, but when there's solidarity, you're having a podcast, you got Tyler on there, you got me on there, pretty sure you got others on there. When you're doing that kind of thing, you're training your people to think about the Imago Dei, not to only think about their own way, right? And
Yeah.
as that happens, what happens is like, they start to feel things just like you would if you kick your pinky toe. You
Right.
know, it's like, man, that's an insignificant part of your body, but my goodness. It's like, wait a minute, not so much, right? It's
That
like that.
shouldn't hurt that bad.
I'm trying to tell you. So you might have small numbers of diversity.
Yeah.
You might have maybe even a somewhat mono-ethnic or monocultural church. You may want to grow into, you know, grow in mirroring what's in your community or whatnot. But at this stage, you can already be listening and learn how to lament with. And I think that that is what actually will contribute to becoming a more diverse church, because when people come into your church, they feel welcome. They
Yeah.
don't feel like a token. They don't feel like a project. They don't feel like a unicorn. It's like, hey, we're just the people of God here. We're regular people. We all are the same, one race, one blood, and we all have the same need, you know, in our brokenness. So kind of spiderwebbed a little bit, but I would
That's
definitely
good.
say like, you know, learning that, man, how to lament with your brothers and sisters. If you don't feel something about the things that we repeatedly see, and kind of that rapid succession that we got hit with. And COVID-19 puts us all on the internet because we're all at home, working from home, you know, not going out, not working in our offices, not gathering at the church and things like that. And we just see a quick, like, oh, there's 3 people who are cut down by what appears to be some white supremacy and racism. And it unearths this, like, we're still divided.
It's
It
a trigger.
calls us to attention, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that is enough. We don't need anything else to,
Yeah.
at this point, say like, okay, there's work for us to do. And the church is the only institution that is uniquely um, stationed in the world to bring about that peace and shalom and reconciliation. It's a biblical thing, right?
Yeah.
It has social um, like, you know, impact, but it's just biblical for us to be one and to be about the Imago Dei and be about others. So
Mm.
yeah, that's
That's good.
you know, that starts with listening, just like Tyler said, right? But
Yeah. Yeah. It
you
does.
know, grow into it.
We're trying to learn. I mean, I'm trying to learn more about lament. I don't think it's something that we, um, especially in more predominantly white cultures, especially us middle class cultures, think through too much. Mainly because I just don't think we've had the same kinds of um, needs to lament. Like I
Yeah,
don't think.
yeah,
But 1/3 of the Psalms is lamenting, and so there's obviously a need for it. And we've talked to some of the pastoral team about it, trying to do some understanding of it. I mean, the list that you gave, which maybe I'll try and put in the show notes here, but
okay,
um, is really really good. I put it out on Facebook when it first came out. All the resources that you gave.
yeah,
Um, Man, it's really helpful. We've tried to read a number of resources and books, listen to podcasts.
good,
Thabiti's been helpful.
that's good.
the guys from Pass the Mic have been helpful. Rich
Right.
Martin, Be the Bridge has been helpful.
Yep.
Like just trying to,
Yep.
and what you get is you get this more well-rounded, man, there's a lot to lament over. I mean,
Yeah.
I just, you don't understand it sometimes, and I don't think I fully grasp it at all. But what is it about? So you said, weep with those who weep. That verse from Romans, weep with those who weep, rejoice with those who rejoice.
Yeah.
We like to major on, at least I should talk about myself. I like to major on rejoicing with those who rejoice, and that's where we want to sit and stay, which isn't wrong. Yeah, we're called to do that. It's good. But if we're never weeping with those who weep, um, I think I just think we maybe we're missing something. I don't
That's
know.
right. Yeah.
Give me a little bit about lament. Give me a little bit about how we
Yeah.
should think of it.
Yeah. Okay. So I can tell you a couple resources that have been helpful. Mark Vergop is a pastor in Indianapolis, and a friend of mine is there kind of in a ministry position and role alongside him in just discipleship in their church.
Yeah.
And he told me, it feels like 4 years ago, something like that, that they were getting ready to work through some things, as a church in these kind of like these DNA groups. And they were just starting really small, but then Mark was writing a book, and the book would go on to be a bestseller. A lot of people have heard of it. It's called Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy, right?
Yeah.
How lament opens, or it just is, the biblical mercy of lament, if you would, is kind of what the book is about. And a lot of people just felt like we learned so much from that book because it, just like you said, you got the Psalms, right? You got the prophets, and you just see how lament is so much a part of the people of God's story and worship and our interaction in a fallen world with a God who controls everything. And it's just, that's how we are real.
Yeah.
And get in touch with our realness. But what was happening at the time that Mark was writing that book is he was also meeting with this diverse group of leaders in their church, talking about areas in their church and community where they were divided ethnically, culturally, socioeconomically. And I mean, they hit a lot of the ethnic and cultural because that's Indianapolis. You're talking previously KKK headquarters. You're
Yeah.
talking about they're black and white is like the stark contrast of what
Right.
black and white represents. And they have a large church. I think maybe 1,000 plus people. And so he's trying to figure out, how do I shepherd all these people as one?
Yeah.
Well, on my birthday this year, the book came out, Weep With Me, July 15th this year. Weep With Me, how lament opens a door for biblical reconciliation. That was what they had really been working through the whole time before Mark even wrote the other book. And so what he shows is by testimony, how leading the church to embrace the weeping and the mourning and to understand the African American experience has been full of lament the whole way. That's how you get the spirituals and a lot of the hymns, and even just the fact that we would continue to worship Christ in the midst of slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, right? The Southern Baptist denomination is born out of the fact that we want to keep segregation, and things like that. And yet we kept the faith along the way. There's been lament has just been a part of it. Not a whole lot to rejoice about other than the gospel.
Exactly.
And so he highlights that, and he brings the historical perspectives together, maps it on biblically and beautifully, and just helps you to think through it. So I've been leading my church through that, preaching through the Psalms, reading that kind of material with us, and helping us to think about those things, because I think that that's the foundation on which a reconciliation is built. And I feel like I just commend those resources to you so that it's not cheapened by like, a quick, comment or whatnot. I think your people should definitely grab those books and be able to read them from a personal, from a perspective of like the personal experience from a white pastor who's pastoring a diverse congregation and wants to see people become one, and like the trouble and the trials that they went through in trying to bring that together, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's
So,
good. That's good, man.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, man.
It's helpful. It's helpful. We'll put that in our in those resources to our Amazon. We'll link to them. So if anybody wants to go, you can just go in the notes here. One more quick question on diversity. What's the difference between being ethnically diverse and culturally diverse in a church? Because I think we can. I think when we say we want diversity, I shouldn't say this. I don't think. I'm afraid that when we say we want diversity, what we think sometimes is ethnic diversity, but we're unwilling to take the steps to get culturally diverse, because it's one thing to just have color in your room. It's another thing to have different cultural experiences that isn't your preference or your background or your desire mixed together, because then everybody's got to give. Like if we're given, cultural diversity, if there's somebody coming from a Hispanic background, you bring some of that into your church, and then they're going to have to give some of what they want away. And if you have an African American context, they're going to the same way in a white context, and all of a sudden it becomes cultural diversity. But that's the church, though. Like that's what the church should be.
Sure.
So give me your thoughts, like differences between ethnic and cultural diversity, and how we should think of that.
You know, sometimes Doug Logan talks about that gumbo pot. You know, the slow cooker, right? Everybody in the pool, all the spices, all the veggies, all the seafood. You throw it all in there, and it's not that it mixes down into one thing where it dies into a melting pot. It actually just becomes this rich diversity that's more enjoyable because we all contribute, and that's what I think gets lost when we talk about diversity from a high level and we don't bring it down to what you just brought it down to. So ethnic diversity is just that. Yeah, you got people from diverse ethnic contexts who are in one place. Ethnic diversity happens a lot when the Cardinals play. Everybody comes in, they all put on their hats, and they all become what? We Cardinals fans, right? And so they're out there and they're rooting them on. But when they drive away, they go back and they don't really consider themselves to be one, because it's all just something that brought us together at one place. It's pretty superficial. We all wore the jersey. We all cheered for the same thing. The church shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be that we come together and we can tolerate and put up with each other for a short period of time because we're all singing about Jesus, but we go back into a divided and a segregated context and life and living. The church should be a place where we come together and we actually are integrated, and we see that cultural diversity is making its way into the way we sing, the way we preach, the way that we worship, the things that we eat, the events that we plan, the holidays that we celebrate, because we have a rich diversity of people who are here, and their culture doesn't come here and die just because they put the team jersey on for a moment and we make them assimilate to the dominant culture. And so, you use the word, colorful, right? And I tell people that all the time, like, be careful that you're not just doing something that would lead you toward having kind of a multicolored church and not a multicultural church. When you have cultures come into the same church, it becomes a beautiful thing where you experience the richness of ethnic diversity, because now a person gets to come and be themselves, be known, know and be known as, say, a Mexican American individual who's different than the Guatemalan and different than the El Salvadorian. And when you have community group and missional communities happening on Wednesday and Thursday night, it's like we're not always having the same kinds of dishes, and we're also able to help people to know and love more about the culture. It's like, oh man, we got tacos, and we also got pupusas, right? And they're not one and the same, and so on and so forth. So I think it becomes a place where we experience the Imago Dei and all that it was created and intended to be. If Acts chapter 17, Paul's preaching to Areopagus, and he says from one family he made from one man, he made every single family lives on the earth. We go back to Adam, we understand that, well, God's intended design is that the diversity of the human race would be experienced by all of us, because not one dominant ethnicity or culture is the most glory giving to him. In order to experience the diversity and the beauty of the triune God that is a unity in diversity, Father, Son, Spirit, we actually need all of us. And he created male, female, and everything in between on the ethnic and cultural scale to do that. So it takes more work. That means that you're going to bring in different illustrations sometimes. And, if you're teaching through something in your small group, it means that you're going to think about how to, like I said, celebrate things, or even just like what you just said. What you said to me is, I think the people at Anchor Church need to really understand how privileged they are to be able to have had conversations with Tyler St. Clair right after Ahmaud Arbery, because you got to see and experience how is this gospel-centered African-American man who's in our diverse global family up in the Midwest thinking through these things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How's he thinking through these things, and how can I be thinking through them? It's like it informs you and it makes it more rich, as opposed to it being something that's like still, I mean, divide is not the word, but yeah, superficial.
Yeah. Superficial is a good word. I think
Yeah.
that's good. That the Cardinal Stadium and that metaphor is really helpful. I think I had never thought about that, but man, that is helpful. That's not the church.
Right.
To rally around something and then go away separately.
Yeah. The world does ethnic diversity better than the church ever will.
Yeah.
Because it's just based in tolerance.
Yeah, right.
You know what? They shrink those scales down so far. It's like you could be a man who want to be a dog now, and like you cool. You can jump in with us.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
I mean, it's just like whatever.
Yeah.
But the issue is like that's still not real. No. Tolerance is not what the gospel calls it to. Gospel calls us to. Gospel calls us to oneness, and oneness is something that says that I'm going to outdo you. It's like the one another's, right? All of a sudden becomes something that we can even work out in the context of cross-cultural relationships. Yeah. Outdoing one another with showing honor. First Corinthians, like the body analogy. And you think about the fact that we show greater honor on those members of ours that need it. We're all indispensable members of each other. We start being connected at deep levels as opposed to like in the superficial ways. And we see the glory of God, man. Beautiful things happen when we see our reconciliation with the Father begin to express itself in the reconciliation that we have with one another, because it's like we start to really realize what it means that we're one.
Yeah, that's good.
Live into that. And so multicultural expressions of local church ministry give us the opportunities to do that. And every church is going to be different. And I would say the way that you fight it from being tokenism or disingenuine is like you don't just go out and say, okay, so then we're just going to go over here and like pretend this, or like, oh, we're going to all act as if we were this. No, we're going to say, who do we have in our church and who are we reaching, and how can we celebrate that, and how can we platform that, how can we speak to that and speak for that, and so on and so forth, because we're all one body. So it's not just the dominant perspective that has the voice and the representation. In fact, for that First Corinthians passage that talks about the body tells me that I need to be more about, or I need to be laser focused on how to lift the underrepresented voices in my church. So if you have a Hispanic woman, find out what her Hispanic, ethnic heritage is, and, start to get to know her personally and individually, and start to affirm that and bring that into, body life in all the various ways that you can. Holidays are helpful for that. Food selections are helpful for that. You may not need to start singing in Spanish today, but it might be a great expression, all kinds of stuff. So
yeah, that's good, man. Yeah, that's good. make sure everybody brings their best cultural dish, and let's just enjoy it all at the
Hey,
same
hey,
time.
that's absolutely what you do.
Yeah.
That's the best way to do it. Food is a leveler, man.
Food is a lot of brings us all together.
Yeah, that's
It
right. Shoot.
does, man. All right, so let's go rapid fire, so we don't take forever here, but I do want to get to a couple other things. You
All
have
right.
8 kids. I could actually talk to you about diversity for a long time, so I might have to have you on again because I think we talk more about this stuff.
You can have me. Yeah, you can have me on, or you can have me over. I mean,
Dude,
I would
we
love to
just
come.
talked about having you come. We just talked about having you come. I'd love to have you come preach at our church, man. I'd love to have you
Oh,
come over.
I didn't say I was gonna preach.
No,
That's your job.
that's what I want. That's what I want. I want you to come. And when you're over here, we'll have you over, and I'll smoke you some ribs, and then you can judge them.
Ooh.
And we'll talk. We're gonna talk about ribs. We're gonna talk about smoking some meat here in a second.
All right, let's go.
I've seen you do it. But before I get to there, you have 8 kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the one thing that you've learned that has helped to raise your kids that you wish you knew before you had kids? Help some parents here. One thing that has helped you raise your kids, you've learned along the way that you just, man, I just wish I knew this before I had kids.
I'm still learning, man, and I'm learning the hard way. You know what? Because I'm not just saying this because we just had the ethnic and cultural diversity conversation, but there's a principle of getting to know individuals individually that really applies, and you have to remember that with a big family. I could tribalize my kids. We're Ross crew, and everybody is and treat them and think that they're all the same. My wife helps me so much to remember that child doesn't need that kind of leadership. That child doesn't need that kind of discipline. This child is totally different than that one emotionally, and so on and so forth. And so cultivating individual relationships and trying to be intentional with that is something that I have learned, and I am still learning, that with my youngest children, I need to do that on purpose and with focus. And with my oldest children. So I have a 19-year-old college student and I have a 2-year-old in diapers, and I got everything in between.
Yeah.
And it's like I have to be able to know them as individuals. And I think that is like probably something that's on my plate most, because that can be a nice little circus these days.
It could be.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Getting face time and individual time and finding out what's going on in their minds and in their world and what they like and what their dislikes are, their comfort levels. I have a daughter right now who is out leading protests in our community, and I have a son who begged me not to and doesn't even want me to say anything about it because he's fearful. How do I shepherd and lead both of them?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good word. That's a really good word. I'm thinking about my kids too. Like, how do I make sure I'm doing that with them? I heard someone once say that parenting isn't the raising of kids, but it's the raising of parents. God uses parenting to actually mature us as parents along the way. What has God taught you about yourself in parenting, man? What has God taught you?
Yeah, I mean, you don't. It's just like getting married too, right? Like you don't know you're impatient and selfish until you walking through Vaughn's and you just throwing Frosted Flakes in the. It's like, y'all got married last week. You going grocery shopping? She don't eat that. And you can't just keep. You can't just go do what you used to do. It's like, what kind of cereal are we buying? So I feel like with the parenting thing, and I learned so much about my need to grow, and it really comes out in fatherhood in areas where I'm pretty. I can be angry. Be short. The Lord is long suffering, his loving kindness is, think about his steadfast love and how it is faithful to us, and that it is compassionate and it's slow to anger.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like God just challenges me regularly with that. Dealing with things with my teenage son, even in the last couple days, has reminded me of the grace that God extends to me and the faithful love that he gives to me, and how that's what I'm called to bend out and extend toward my son. And oftentimes it's like you get well into whatever the issue is at hand before you realize that, okay, that would be out of step with like what God has called me to. And so I feel like it's like on the job training. I'm constantly having to exercise that, but it's taught me, um, it's taught me a lot in that regard. And I'll just say this, I know I'm kind of getting long-winded on that question, but I'll say this, it's also taught me about God's goodness. So it's taught me a lot about myself, but it's also taught me about like my value and what redemption actually means for myself, because I'm the guy who was raised in a single mom home. My dad wasn't there. In fact, my dad was known in the community as being into drugs and things like that. And so for God to actually heal those things and redeem them in my life, it just shows me like nobody is outside of this. Like you can't change. I don't get an opportunity to be like, well, I'm just this way. This is the way I was created. This is the way I was raised. Like, no, actually God has shown me like you can change, you know? And so that's been a beautiful thing to like live into and discover along the way.
That's good. Yeah, God loves to fix the impossible situations.
You got it.
Yeah, that's good, bro. All right, let's talk about the really important stuff. So we talked about these things. They're important, really important things. What do you prefer to smoke, brisket or ribs? What's your favorite? What's the better option?
Oh, man, the brisket is more rewarding.
Oh man,
it's also harder. But I love the challenge. I'm up for it. And I'm always trying to tweak one last thing, right? And you just think about with the ribs, it's kind of like, oh, did I mop them or not? Was it dry or wet? And was it slab or baby back? Am I talking about some, different kinds of things like that? Beef ribs or pork ribs, all that stuff, it is different. But when you do a brisket, typically you're keeping most of it the same, and it's just maybe a little longer on the smoke, maybe a little less on the pepper, more on the salt, all that kind of stuff. Like I like brisket for sure. But the problem is I'm typically smoking a whole packer brisket, and even though I got a big family, like anybody gonna eat that much.
Yeah, I know.
So I'm always trying to figure out an excuse to bring people over to cook this 15 to 17 pound piece of cow.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where you can tell what I can get passionate about.
When you do it right, though, and you started doing over quarantine. Maybe you did it before. I saw it, but you're doing like, what did you call it? Backyard. What did you
backyard call it? Barbecue? Backyard barbecue.
Backyard barbecue. While you're smoking some meat, you're talking and bringing the word to bear. I think it's great. Do you just use a smoker? Are you still on a grill, or you're like, nah, I'm a smoker guy at this point. I'm gonna smoke everything.
Yeah, you know what? I got a kind of diversity going right now. So I got like a smoker, and I'm also using my old kettle grill. Just the regular old Weber. I tell people all the time, like if you can get it right on this, you can do anything else. This is the one, right?
Yeah.
Some of the best meat comes out of that bad boy. Anybody can do this. And then I also am loving using my ceramic cooker. So most people know like the green egg, Kamado Joe, whatever. I have a Pit Boss ceramic cooker, and it's like, man, I just absolutely love cooking on that thing. So I cook on it more than anything else because I can get the high temperatures when I'm grilling, and I can hold that low temperature for the brisket and go to sleep at night, and let it go over. And it's smoking all night, and it's keeping that temp. So
yeah, that's good. Yeah, I bought a Traeger last in March, and I'm like, dude, I've smoked 3 briskets, and the first one took 15 hours, and it didn't finish until like after dinner.
Yeah.
But man, I cut into that thing, and it was
just like
amazing. Yeah, because I'm following. Nobody cares about this but us. That's okay. I'm following. I went on Franklin's because Franklin's has he's got a YouTube video on how to smoke his brisket. Like this is how I do it. So I'm like, I'm just gonna follow this thing.
Yep.
It's legit. All right. Well, let's see. You ever smoked a turkey for Thanksgiving? I'm thinking about doing that this year.
Absolutely. And it's probably the best turkey I've ever had.
Oh, man.
I grew up in a home where mom was going to throw one in the oven. My wife's family lived across the street. Her mom cooked a killer oven basted, just a great roasted turkey, right? And then my stepdad would always go and deep fry a turkey. So I grew up in a home tasting all that.
everything.
When I first smoked a turkey, I said to myself, like, man, I don't think I'm ever going to eat any of those other ones.
That's what I've
It's
heard.
amazing. It's
That's what I've
amazing. It is, and it doesn't take too long either.
No, that's what I've heard. A
Yeah.
lot of butter. A lot of butter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just dry out.
Yeah, I made a little butter, like some rosemary and some thyme, and I mean, just basting that bad boy every 30 minutes, and it's good.
I was telling Tiffany, my wife, I was saying, I think we should have people over this Thanksgiving. I'm gonna smoke the turkey.
Heck yeah, do it.
And we'll make it
I'm
happen.
gonna tell you where you're gonna be sold. It's gonna be when you cut into the breast and it's so moist that you don't want any of the dark meat. That's where you're gonna say, "What in the world is this?" Like, I'm used to this not being the case. It is crazy flavorful and moist, and on a Traeger, yeah, you will win.
All right. I'm gonna do it. You've convinced me. I'm making it happen this year.
No doubt. I want to see pics.
Yeah, I'll send it to you, man. Hey, thanks for jumping on with us.
doubt.
Where can we learn more from you? How can we follow you, benefit from your wisdom, see more from you?
No doubt. Well, Arise Ventura has sermon links and some videos if anybody ever wants to hear like formal something. But I'm on Instagram talking about my love for barbecue and coffee. So it's like family barbecue and coffee is really all you're going to find out about me on Instagram at Urban Spurgeon. And then on Twitter and Facebook, I can also be found at Urban Spurgeon. And that's probably where I'm like, talking about or giving sound bites and things like that. So that's my social media handles and whatnot. But for the most part, I try to be accessible to any and everyone. So if you hit me on that, then we can chat about, whatever you need.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's been great having you, man. Thanks for jumping on with us. I'm gonna have you on again because I'd like to talk a little bit more about these things. This is such a hot topic this time, and we want to make sure that we're being biblical in how we're thinking through it. And you've helped us, so
It's been good. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Well, this has been Outside Our Walls. Thank you guys for jumping on. Looking forward to next time. We'll see you soon. See ya.